Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Morals and Dogma Podcast, Episode 2. Today we're going to continue with the Morals and Dogma book by Albert Pike. Remember, we're attempting to get to the bottom of what these weirdos are about, right? So, let me begin. 2. The fellow craft. In the ancient Orient, all religion was more or less a mystery, and there was no divorce from it of philosophy. The popular theology, taking the multitude of allegories and symbols for realities, degenerated into a worship of celestial luminaries, of imaginary deities with human feelings, passions, appetites, and lusts, of idols, stones, animals, reptiles. The onion was sacred to the Egyptians because its different layers were a symbol of the concentric heavenly spheres. Of course, the popular religion could not satisfy the deeper longings and thoughts, the loftier aspirations of the spirit, or the logic of reason. The first, therefore, was taught to the initiated in the mysteries. There also it was taught by symbols. The vagueness of symbolism, capable of many interpretations, reached what the palpable and conventional creed could not. Its indefiniteness acknowledged the abstruseness of the subject. It treated that mysterious subject mystically. It endeavored to illustrate what it could not explain, to excite an appropriate feeling if it could not develop an adequate idea, and to make the image a mere subordinate conveyance for the conception, which itself never became obvious or familiar. Thus, the knowledge now imparted by books and letters was of old conveyed by symbols, and the priests invented or perpetuated a display of rites and exhibitions, which were not only more attractive to the eye than words, but often more suggestive and more pregnant with meaning to the mind. Masonry, the successor of the mysteries, still follows the ancient manner of teaching. Her ceremonies are like the ancient mystic shows, not the reading of an essay, but the opening of a problem, requiring research and constituting philosophy, the arch expounder. Her symbols are the instruction she gives. The lectures are endeavors, often partial and one-sided, to interpret these symbols. He who would become an accomplished Mason must not be content merely to hear or even to understand the lectures. He must, aided by them, and they having, as it were, marked out the way for him, study, interpret, and develop these symbols for himself. Though Masonry is identical with the ancient mysteries, it is so only in this qualified sense, that it presents but an imperfect image of their brilliancy, the ruins only of their grandeur, and a system that has experienced progressive alterations, the fruits of social events, political circumstances, and the ambitious imbecility of its improvers. After leaving Egypt, the mysteries were modified by the habits of the different nations among whom they were introduced, and especially by the religious systems of the countries into which they were transplanted. To maintain the established government laws and religion was the obligation of the initiate everywhere, and everywhere they were the heritage of the priests, who were nowhere willing to make the common people co-proprietors with themselves of philosophical truth. Masonry is not the Colosseum in ruins. It is rather a Roman palace of the Middle Ages, disfigured by modern architectural improvements, yet built on a cyclopean foundation, laid by the Etruscans, and with many a stone of the superstructure taken from the dwellings and temples of the age of Hadrian and Antoninus. Christianity taught the doctrine of fraternity, but repudiated that of political equality by continually inculcating obedience to Caesar and to those lawfully in authority. Masonry was the first apostle of equality. In the monastery there is fraternity and equality, but no liberty. Masonry added that also, and claimed for man the threefold heritage: liberty, equality, and fraternity. It was but a development of the original purpose of the mysteries, which was to teach men to know and practice their duties to themselves and their fellows, the great practical end, and all philosophy and all knowledge. Truths are the springs from which duties flow, and it is but a few hundred years since a new truth began to distinctly seen that man is supreme over institutions, and not they over him. Man has natural empire over all institutions. They are for him, according to his development, and not he for them. So let me pause and see if I can interpret this here. So, truths are the springs from which duties flow, and it is but a few hundred years since a new truth began to be distinctly seen. That man is supreme over institutions and not they over him. Man has natural empire over all institutions. This is why they feel like they're above the law. Right? Why their actions are above government. Because man has natural empire over institutions, not the other way around. They are for him according to his development, not he for them. This seems to us a very simple statement, one to which all men everywhere ought to be assent. But once it was a great new truth, not revealed until governments had been in existence for at least 5,000 years. Once revealed, it imposed new duties on men. Man owed it to himself to be free. He owed it to his country to seek to give her freedom or maintain her in that possession. It made tyranny and usurpation the enemies of the human race. It created a general outlawry of despots and despotisms, temporal and spiritual. The sphere of duty was immensely enlarged. Patriotism had henceforth a new and wider meaning. Free government, free thought, free conscience, free speech, all these came to be inalienable rights, which those who had parted with them or been robbed of them or whose ancestors had lost them had the right summarily to retake. Unfortunately, as truths always become perverted into falsehoods, and are falsehoods when misapplied, this truth became the gospel of anarchy soon after it was preached. Masonry early comprehended this truth and recognized its own enlarged duties. Its symbols then came to have a wider meaning, but it also assumed the mask of stonemasonry and borrowed its working tools, and so was supplied with new and apt symbols. It aided in bringing about the French Revolution, disappeared with the Gurdonists, was born again with the restoration of order, and sustained Napoleon, because though emperor, he acknowledged the right of the people to select its rulers, and was at the head of a nation refusing to receive back its old kings. He pleaded with saber, musket, and cannon the great cause of the people against royalty, the right of the French people even to make a Corsican general their emperor if it pleased them. Masonry felt that this truth had the omnipotence of God on its side, and that neither pope nor potentate could overcome it. It was a truth dropped into the world's wide treasury, and forming a part of the heritage which each generation receives in large and holds in trust, and of necessity bequeaths to mankind the personal estate of man, entailed of nature to the end of time. And Masonry early recognized it as true, that to set forth and develop a truth, or any human excellence of gift or growth, is to make greater the spiritual glory of the race. And whoever aids the march of a truth and makes the thought a thing, writes in the same line with Moses and with him who died upon the cross, and has an intellectual sympathy with the deity himself. The best gift we can bestow on man is manhood. It is that which Masonry is ordained of God to bestow on its votaries, not sectarianism and religious dogma, not rudimental morality that may be found in the writings of Confucius, Zoroaster, Seneca, and the rabbis in the Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, not a little and cheap common school knowledge, but manhood and science and philosophy. Not that philosophy or science is in opposition to religion, for philosophy is but that knowledge of God and the soul which is derived from observation of the manifested action of God and the soul, and from a wise analogy. It is the intellectual guide which the religious sentiment needs. The true religious philosophy of an imperfect being is not a system of creed, but as Socrates thought, an infinite search or approximation. Philosophy is that intellectual and moral progress which the religious sentiment inspires and ennobles. As to science, it could not walk alone while religion was stationary. It consists of those matured inferences from experience, which all other experience confirms. It realizes and unites all that was truly valuable in both the old schemes of mediation, one heroic or system of action and effort, and the mystical theory of spiritual contemplative communion. Listen to me, says Galen, as to the voice of the Eleusinian Hierophant, and believe that the study of nature is a mystery no less important than theirs, nor less adapted to display the wisdom and power of the great Creator. Their lessons and demonstrations were obscure, but ours are clear and unmistakable. We deem that to be the best knowledge we can obtain of the soul of another man, which is furnished by his actions and his lifelong conduct, evidence to the contrary supplied by what another man informs us that his soul has said to his, would weigh a little against the former. The first scriptures for the human race were written by God on earth and heavens. The reading of these scriptures is science. Familiarity with the grass and trees, the insects, and the infusoria teaches us deeper lessons of love and faith that we can glean from the writings of Fenelon and Augustine. The great Bible of God is ever open before mankind. Knowledge is convertible into power, and axioms into rules of utility and duty. But knowledge itself is not power. Wisdom is power, and her prime minister is justice, which is the perfected law of truth. The purpose, therefore, of education and science is to make a man wise. If knowledge does not make him so, it is wasted, like water poured on the sand. To know the formulas of masonry is of as little value by itself as to know many words and sentences in some barbarous African or Australasian dialect. To know even the meaning of the symbols is but little, unless that adds to our wisdom and also to our charity, which is to justice like one hemisphere of the brain to the other. Do not lose sight, then, of the true object of your studies in masonry. It is to add to your estate of wisdom, and not merely to your knowledge. A man may spend a lifetime in studying a single specialty of knowledge, botany, conchology, or entomology, for instance, in committing to memory names derived from the Greek, and classifying and reclassifying, and yet be no wiser than when he began. It is the great truths as to all that most concern a man as to his rights, interests, and duties that masonry seeks to teach their initiates. The wiser a man becomes, the less will be he inclined to submit tamely to the imposition of fetters or a yoke on his conscience or his person. For by increase of wisdom he not only better knows his rights, but the more highly values them, and is more conscious of his worth and dignity. His pride then urges him to assert his independence. He becomes better able to assert it also, and better able to assist others or his country when they or she stake all, even existence, upon the same assertion. But mere knowledge makes no one independent, nor fits him to be free. It often only makes him a more useful slave. Liberty is a curse to the ignorant and brutal. Political science has for its object to ascertain in what manner and by means of what institutions political and personal freedom may be secured and perpetuated, not license or the mere right of every man to vote, but entire and absolute freedom in thought of opinion, alike free of the despotism of monarch and mob and prelate, freedom of action within the limits of the general law enacted for all, the courts of justice with impartial judges and juries, open to all alike, weakness and poverty equally potent in those courts as power and wealth. The avenues to office and honor open alike to all the worthy. The military powers in war or peace, in strict subordination to the civil power. Arbitrary arrests for acts not known to the law as crimes, impossible. Romish Inquisition, star chambers, military commissions, unknown. The means of instruction within reach of the children of all. The right of free speech and accountability of all public officers, civil and military. If masonry needed to be justified for imposing political as well as moral duties on its initiates, it would be enough to point to the sad history of the world. It would not even need that she should turn back the pages of history to the chapters written by Tacitus, that she should recite the incredible horrors of despotism under Caligula and Domitian, Caracalla and Commodus, Vitellius and Maximin. She need only point out the centuries of calamity through which the gay French nation passed, to the long oppression of the feudal ages, of the selfish Bourbon kings, to those times when the peasants were robbed and slaughtered by their own lords and princes, like sheep, when the lord claimed the first fruits of the peasant's marriage bed, when the captured city was given up to merciless rape and massacre, when the state prisons groaned with innocent victims, and the church blessed the banners of pitiless murders, and sang Te Deums for the crowning mercy of the eve of St. Bartholomew. We might turn over the pages to a later chapter, that of the reign of the 15 Louis, when young girls, hardly more than children, were kidnapped to serve his lusts, when letters de cachet filled the Bastille with persons accused of no crime, with husbands who were in the way of the pleasures of lascivious wives, and of villains wearing orders of nobility, when the people were ground between the upper and the nether millstone of taxes, customs, and excises, and when me Pope's nuncio and the Cardinal de la Roche-Aymon, devoutly kneeling, one on each side of Madame du Barry, the king's abandoned prostitute, put the slippers on her naked feet as she rode from the adulterous bed, then indeed suffering and toil were the two forms of man, and the people were but beasts of burden. The true Mason is he who labors strenuously to help his order effect the great purposes. Not that the order can effect them by itself, but that it too can help. It also is one of God's instruments. It is a force and a power, and shame upon it if it did not exert itself, and if need be, sacrifice its children in the cause of humanity, as Abraham was ready to offer up Isaac on the altar of sacrifice. It will not forget that noble allegory of Courteous leaping, all in armor, into the great yawning gulf that opened to swallow Rome. I will try. It shall not be its fault if the day never comes when the man will no longer have to fear a conquest, an invasion, a usurpation, a rivalry of nations, with the armed hand and interruption of civilization depending on a marriage royal or a birth in the hereditary tyrannies, a partition of the peoples by a congress, a dismemberment by the downfall of a dynasty, a combat of two religions, meeting head to head like two goats of darkness on the bridge of the infinite, when they will no longer have to fear famine, spoliation, prostitution from distress, misery from lack of work, and all the brigandages of chance in the forest of events, when nations will gravitate about the truth like stars about the light, each in its own orbit, without clashing or collision, and everywhere freedom, cinctured with stars, crowned with the celestial splendors, and with wisdom and justice on either hand, will reign supreme. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you start to philosophize too often without psychedelics. Right? This motherfucker, holy shit. A little acid would have set these people straight right from fucking day one. This is some nonsense. Nonsense. This is reflection on days past and projection of what they believe those days were like. Give me a fucking break. I'm already getting pissed off. The arrogance is overwhelming. And I have no problem with arrogance. Please. You can be as arrogant as you want if you earned it. This is bullshit. We do not now discuss the differences between reason and faith and undertake to define the domain in each, but it is necessary to say that even in the ordinary affairs of life we are governed far more by what we believe than what we know, by faith and analogy than by reason. The age of reason of the French Revolution taught, we know, what a folly it is to enthrone reason by itself as supreme. Reason is at fault when it deals with the infinite. There we must revere and believe, notwithstanding the calamities of the virtuous, the miseries of the deserving, the prosperity of tyrants and the murder of martyrs. We must believe there's a wise, just, merciful, and loving God, an intelligence and a providence supreme over all and caring for the minutest things and events. A faith is a necessity to man. Woe to him who believes nothing. We believe that the soul of another is of certain nature and possesses certain qualities, that he is generous and honest, or penurious and knavish, that she is virtuous and amiable, or vicious and ill-tempered, from the countenance alone, from little more than a glimpse of it, without the means of knowing. We venture our fortune on the signature of a man on the other side of the world whom we never saw, upon the belief that he is honest and trustworthy. We believe that occurrences have taken place upon the assertion of others. We believe that one will act upon another, and in reality of a multitude of others, phenomena that reason cannot explain. We ought not to believe that reason authoritatively denies that at which the sense of right revolts, that which is absurd or self-contradictory, or at issue with experience or science, or that which degrades the character of the deity and would make him revengeful, malignant, cruel, or unjust. A man's faith is as much his own as his reason is. His freedom consists as much in his faith being free as in his will being uncontrolled by power. All the priests and augurs of Rome or Greece had not the right to require Cicero or Socrates to believe in the absurd mythology of the vulgar. All the imams and Mohammedanism, I can't even read that word, Mohammedanism, there we go, have not the right to require a pagan to believe that Gabriel dictated the Quran to the prophet. All the Brahmins that ever lived, if assembled in one conclave like the cardinals, could not gain a right to compel a single human being to believe in the Hindu cosmogony. No man or body of men can be infallible and authorized to decide what other men shall believe as to any tenet of faith, except those who first receive it, every religion and the truth of all inspired writings depend on human testimony and internal evidences, to be judged of reason by and the wise analogies of faith. Each man must necessarily have the right to judge of their truth for himself, because no one man can have any higher or better right to judge than another of equal information and intelligence. But if you're not of equal information and intelligence, then they do have the right to judge, right? Is that what they're saying? Domitian claimed to be the Lord God, and statues and images of him in silver and gold were found throughout the known world. He claimed to be regarded as the God of all men, and according to Suetonius, began his letters thus: "Our Lord and God commands it that it shall be done, and so, and formally decreed that no one should address him otherwise, either in writing or by word of mouth. Palfurius Sura, the philosopher who was in chief delator, accusing those who refused to recognize his divinity, however much he may have believed in that divinity, had not the right to demand a single Christian in Rome or the provinces should do the same. Reason is far from being the only guide. In morals or in political science, love or loving kindness must keep it company, to exclude fanaticism, intolerance, and persecution, to all of which a morality, to aesthetic and extreme political principles invariably lead. We must also have faith in ourselves and in our fellows and the people, or we shall be easily discouraged by reverses and our ardor cooled by obstacles. We must not listen to reason alone. Force comes more from faith and love, and it is by the aid of these that man scales the loftiest heights of morality, or becomes the savior and redeemer of a people. Reason must hold the helm, but these supply the motive power. They are the wings of the soul. Enthusiasm is generally unreasoning, and without it, and love and faith, there would have been no Reinzel or Tell or Sidney or any of the great patriots whose names are immortal. If the deity had been merely and only all-wise and almighty, he would never have created the universe. It is genius that gets power, and its prime lieutenants are force and wisdom. The unruliest of men bend before the leader that has the sense to see and the will to do. It is genius that rules with godlike power, that unveils with its counselors the hidden human mysteries, cuts asunder with its words the huge knots, and builds up with its word the crumbled ruins. At its glance falls down the senseless idols whose altars have been on all the high places and in all the sacred groves. Dishonesty and imbecility stand abashed before it. Its single yea or nay revokes the wrongs of ages, and is heard among the future generations. Its power is immense because its wisdom is immense. Genius is the son of the political sphere. Force and wisdom it ministers are the orbs that carry its light into darkness and answer it with their solid reflecting truth. Development is symbolized by the use of the mallet and the chisel. The development of the energies and intellect of the individual and the people. Genius may place itself at the head of an unintellectual, uneducated, unenergetic nation, but in a free country. To cultivate the intellect of those who elect is the only mode of securing intellect and genius for rulers. The world is seldom ruled by the great spirits except after dissolution and new birth, in periods of transition and convulsion. The long parliaments, the Robespierres and Marats, and the semi-respectabilities of intellect too often hold the reins of power. The Cromwells and Napoleons come later. After Marius and Sulla and Cicero, the rhetorician, Caesar, the great intellect is often too sharp for the granite of this life. Legislators may be very ordinary men, for legislation is very ordinary work, but it is the final issue of a million minds. The power of the purse or the sword compared to that of the spirit is poor and contemptible. As to lands, you may have agrarian laws and equal partition, but a man's intellect is all his own, held direct from God, an inalienable fief. It is the most potent of weapons in the hands of a paladin. If the people comprehend force in the physical sense, how much more do they reverence the intellectual? Ask Hildebrand or Luther or Loyola. They fall prostrate before it as before an idol. The mastery of mind over mind is the only conquest worth having. The other injures both and dissolves at a breath. Rude as it is, the great cable falls down and snaps at last. But this dimly resembles the dominion of the Creator. It does not need a subject like that of Peter the Hermit. If the stream be but bright and strong, it will sweep like a spring tide to the popular heart. Not in word only, but in intellectual act lies the fascination. It is the homage to the invisible. This power knotted with love is the golden chain let down into the well of truth, or the invisible chain that binds the ranks of mankind together. Influence of man over man is a law of nature, whether it be by great estate in land or in intellect. It may mean slavery, a deference to the eminent human judgment. Society hangs spiritually together, like the revolving spheres above. The free country in which intellect and genius govern will endure. Where they serve and other influences govern, the national life is short. All the nations that have tried to govern themselves by their smallest, by the incapables or merely respectables, have come to naught. Constitutions and laws without genius and intellect to govern will not prevent decay. In that case, they have the dry rot and the life dies out of them by degrees. To give a nation the franchise of intellect is the only sure mode of perpetuating freedom. Hang on, let me reread that. To give a nation the franchise of the intellect is the only sure mode of perpetuating freedom. This will compel exertion and generous care for the people from those on the higher seats, and honorable and intelligent allegiances from those below. Then political public life will protect all men from self-abasement in sensual pursuits, from vulgar acts and low greed, by giving the noble ambition of just imperial rule. To elevate the people by teaching loving kindness and wisdom, with power to him who teach best, and so to develop the free state from the rough ashlar, is the great labor in which masonry desires to lend a helping hand. All of us should labor in building up the great momentum of a nation, the holy house of the temple. The cardinal virtues must not be partitioned among men, become the exclusive property of some, like the common crafts. All are apprenticed to the partner's duty and honor. Masonry is a march and a struggle toward the light. For the individual as well as the nation, light is virtue, manliness, intelligence, liberty. Tyranny over the soul or body is darkness. The freest people, like the freest man, is always in danger of relapsing into servitude. Wars are almost always fatal to republics. They create tyrants and consolidate their power. They spring, for the most part, from evil councils, when the small and the base are entrusted with power, legislation, and administration, become but two parallel series of errors and blunders ending in war, calamity, and the necessity for a tyrant. When the nation feels its feet sliding backward, as if it were walked on the ice, the time has come for a supreme effort. The magnificent tyrants of the past are but the types of those of the future. Men and nations will always sell themselves into slavery to gratify their passions and obtain revenge. The tyrant's plea, necessity, is always available, and the tyrant once in power, the necessity of providing for his safety makes him savage. Religion is a power that he must control. Independent in its sanctuaries might rebel. Then it becomes unlawful for the people to worship God in their own way, and the old spiritual despotisms revive. Men must believe as power wills or die, and even they may believe as they will. All they have, lands, houses, body, and soul, are stamped with the royal brand. I'm the state, said Louis XIV to his peasants. The very shirts on your backs are mine, and I can take them if I will. And dynasties so established endure, like that of the Caesars of Rome, of the Caesars of Constantinople, of the Caliphs, the Stuarts, the Spaniards, the Goths, the Valois, until the race wears out and ends with lunatics and idiots who still rule. There is no concord among men to end the horrible bondage. The state falls inwardly as well as by the outward blows of the incoherent elements, the furious human passions, the sleeping human indolence, the stolid human ignorance, the rivalry of human castes, are as good for the kings as swords of the paladins. The worshippers have all bowed so long to the old idol that they cannot go into the streets and choose another Grand Lama. And so the effete state floats on down the puddled stream of time until the tempest or the tidal sea discovers that the worm has consumed its strength and it crumbles into oblivion. Civil and religious freedom must go hand in hand, and persecution matures them both. A people content with the thoughts made for them by the priests of a church will be content with royalty by divine right. The church and the throne mutually sustain each other. They will smother schism and reap infidelity and indifference, and while the battle for freedom goes on around them, they will only sink the more apathetically into servitude and a deep trance, perhaps occasionally interrupted by furious fits of frenzy, followed by helpless exhaustion. Despotism is not difficult in any land that has only known one master from its childhood. But there's no harder problem than to perfect and perpetuate free government by the people themselves, for it is not one king that is needed. All must be kings. It is easy to set up Masaniello, that in a few days he may fall lower than before. But free government grows slowly, like the individual human faculties, and like the forest trees from the inner heart outward. Liberty is not only the common birthright, but it is lost as well by non-user as misuser. It depends far more on the universal effort than any other human property. It has no single shrine or holy well of pilgrimage for the nation, for its waters should be burst out freely from the whole soil. The free popular power is one that is only known by its strength in the hour of adversity, for all its trials, sacrifices, and expectations are its own. It is trained to think for itself and also to act for itself. When the enslaved people prostrate themselves in the dust before the hurricane, like the alarmed beasts of the field, the free people stand erect before it in all the strength of unity, in self-reliance, in mutual reliance. With effrontery against all but the visible hand of God, it is neither cast down by calamity, nor elated by success. The vast power of endurance, of forbearance, of patience, and of performance is only acquired by continual exercise of all functions, like the healthy physical human vigor, like the individual moral vigor, and the maxim is no less true than the eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. It is curious to observe the universal pretext by which the tyrants of all time take away the national liberties. It is stated in the statutes of Edward II that the justices and the sheriff should no longer be elected by the people on account of these riots and dissensions which had arisen. The same reason was given long before the suppression of popular election of the bishops, and there is a witness to this untruth in the yet older times when Rome lost her freedom and her indignant citizens declared that tumultuous liberty is better than disgraceful tranquility. All right, so, God, after a while my eyes start to glaze over with this just self-aggrandizement. I don't even know how else to put it. So, obviously they put themselves above everybody else, right? They're holier, they're wiser, they know more than anybody, right? And they don't answer to institutions. They're above institutions, right? So now we have a clear perspective on why they feel they're above the law, right? That's exactly what I'm reading here. They're above the law because they're not accountable to institutions. Man is above all institutions. Wisdom is more important than knowledge. The I don't want to use the word arrogance again. It's primitive in this form, but the arrogance here is just overwhelming. It's really truly overwhelming, and the hypocrisy that I'm starting to see. And obviously, we're just starting this. We're in the beginning, but we have repeatedly seen the connection between intelligence and Freemasonry. J. Edgar Hoover, 33rd degree Freemason. Okay, you think there was no connection there between that and his intelligence gathering? Give me a fucking break. So, people in high positions are all members of the Freemasons at some level, it seems. And that is maybe their internal excuse that gets them, they feel like it's okay for them to be above the law because the Freemasons tell them it's okay. Is that a misinterpretation on my part? I don't know. I'm not really sensing that's much of a misinterpretation. But these people, I'm hearing like over and over again, justice and the law and like what's righteous and what's right. But how can you justify that and what we've seen Freemason influence in society? How can you justify those two things? I can't. But if my eyes are glazing over, I know that you guys are all tuning out too. So we're at 34 minutes. All right, I'm going to end it here for today, and we'll be back next time where we'll continue with this chapter. These chapters are pretty fucking long. They're like 40 pages each. So it's probably going to take us a couple days to get through each chapter. But I will be here to get through it with you. So, till next time, everybody. Thanks.